Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over the X-Men. Now, we're still covering Legion Quest, but technically this will be our last video when it comes to Legion Quest. And here's the reason why, because like I said in the last few videos when it came to Legion Quest, where in the main storyline of the event, you had Legion go back in time to hopefully kill off Magneto. And the reason why, because he believed that if Magneto was not around, then Charles Xavier should have the ability to accomplish his lifelong goal, which is mutants and humans being able to live together in harmony. The problem was that when it came to Legion, when he went back in time to hopefully kill off Magneto, he had killed off Charles Xavier instead. And so with the death of Charles Xavier, it had brought in a brand new timeline. And so when it came to the rest of the X books, like Wolverine, X-Factor, Excalibur, X-Force, and so on, all of those different X books were also affected by Legion Quest. And they all kind of ended the same type of way, where you had your heroes go through some type of situation. And by the end of that situation, you had those heroes be frozen in time. And the reason why, because again, the old timeline was going away and a brand new timeline came into the picture. But things were done differently when it came to the Cable book. You see, for Cable, he was there with the rest of the X-Men when it came to hopefully finding a way to stop Legion from changing the timeline. And so when it came to Cable's book, it was more of like an actual epilogue for Legion Quest. The other X books was not like that, because all those different X teams or X characters were out there doing their own thing, not knowing that when it came to the X-Men, things were popping off. The only team who truly knew about it was X-Force. And the reason why, because Cable told them like, hey, listen, we are probably at the end of the world right now. So letting y'all know, I could not help out with any kind of situation at the moment. But for Cable, he was there. And so this book was more of an epilogue. Now, technically, when it comes to this book, it does pick up really in the middle of the ending of Legion Quest. And the reason why I'm saying that, because this book is an epilogue, but it kind of gives us a better idea of how each member of the X-Men in the present day is truly feeling about the idea of the ending of the world. Like, how does Cyclops and Jean Grey feel? How does Rogue and Gambit feel? Archangel and Beast, but especially Cable and Domino as well. How does the X-Men truly feel about the idea of the entire world ending around them after doing all that work to hopefully achieve a goal for Charles Xavier just go to waste, because the world is ending and a brand new timeline is coming into the picture? How do they truly feel? And so this picks up really moments before you had the entire world end around them, but it does pick up right after Cable was able to go back in the past to contact the X-Men who were trapped in the past. You see, when it came to Legion, when he went back in time, he also pulled 4 X-Men along with him. You had Psylocke, Storm, Bishop, and Iceman. And so when they all went back in time, when it came to those 4 X-Men, they did not remember who they were or what their mission was. They had no idea what to do. And so in the present day, you had the Shi'ar Empire give the X-Men and Cable some technology to use to hopefully send Cable back in time by using his astral form to kind of warn the X-Men in the past, like, hey, listen, I'm here to tell you what your mission is and who you guys are. You are the X-Men and you must stop Legion. Now, when it came to Cable, he went back in time in his astral form. He went over to Bishop. And the reason why, because both characters are out of time characters. They're both from the future. So it kind of made sense why Cable was kind of automatically pulled over to Bishop. But once you had Cable warn Bishop like, hey, listen, you guys are the X-Men. Here is your mission, so get to work. You didn't have the 4 X-Men in the past trying their best to stop Legion. The problem is that we already know they're going to fail. And so getting back over to the present day, we kind of pick up at that moment getting into this issue where it's Cable coming back to the present day. He's all like, whew, okay, I did warn them who they are and what is their mission. And so that kind of leads us into the opening pages of the storyline, because now we're picking up with Cyclops being worried about Cable, Jean Grey, and Charles Xavier, because they're still inside the machine that was given to them by the Shi'ar Empire that allowed Cable to go back in the past to warn the X-Men in the past. And so you have Cyclops right now just worrying about Jean Grey and Cable, but especially Cable, because Cable is Cyclops' son from the future. Now, once you do have Cable, Jean Grey, and Charles Xavier just wake up and walk out of a machine, you didn't have Jean Grey walk over to Cyclops. And the reason why, because while being inside that machine, Jean Grey's mind was connected to Cable's mind. And she kind of realized that for Cable, he is constantly battling against the techno-organic virus. Remember, he got that virus when he was a baby thanks to Apocalypse. And so for Jean Grey, she kind of realized that for Cable, he has to use a huge amount of his powers to keep that virus at bay, because if he doesn't, that virus will take over and he would be officially dead. And so right now, it's Jean Grey saying like, Cyclops, like, it's so sad to see our son technically go through what he has to go through to just survive. And so it kind of leads into the whole idea of seeing how the different members of the X-Men truly feel about the possibility of the world ending around them, the world ending period. Because for Gambit, he does get very angry when you have Cable say like, we don't know for sure if the X-Men in the past will be able to pull off the mission. Like, even though I did warn them, most likely they're still going to fail. And when they do fail, get ready to say goodbye to everybody around you, because the world is truly ending. And so for Gambit, he is so angry about it. But for Cable, it's kind of like, dude, first off, you couldn't do really anything at all to help us when it came to sending someone back in the past to warn the X-Men in the past, but also you can't even help right now. So why in the world are you getting in my face? Now you also have Rogue try to get involved as well, but you have Domino try to stop her. But that kind of leads into another argument right there. Now you do have Cyclops being that leader saying, everyone stop. You are all being childish. Like, yes, we already know the world is ending and our emotions are going all over the place. But at the same time, let's try right now to spend these last few moments together in peace and not trying to kill one another. But while you had everybody going back and forth between one another, you also had Lilandra appear. And when she does appear, it's her saying like she has seen different galaxies across the universe right now just being frozen in time. They're going away piece by piece by piece. And so it's kind of like, hey, I think the X-Men in the past failed. If they did, get ready to say goodbye to everyone and everything around you, because all of this is going away. And so this kind of leads us into the whole idea of us learning how the different members of the X-Men are taking the bad news at the moment. So for example, we jump over to Beast, and for Beast, he hates the idea of what he's hearing at the moment, because right now for Beast, he kind of realized that in his life, he has spent so much time focusing on things that was connected to science. He's now kind of wondering like, what if I had the chance to do things differently? What if I had the chance to experience things that was not always connected to science? Now for Archangel, it is completely different, because for this man, for many years, he has technically been alone. Now, yes, he did have girlfriends over the years, but think about it. He was madly in love with Jean Grey. He lost Jean Grey to Cyclops. He then had Candy Southern. He lost her as well to Karen Hodge, who basically killed her off. And so for Archangel, it's kind of like he had no one in his corner. But then he found Psylocke, and that was only weeks ago. But now you are talking about the idea of like, hey, you're not going to see her ever again. But on top of that, you cannot even say goodbye to her. And so for Archangel, the only person right now he can truly say goodbye to is Beast, because they were best friends. They grew up together. They were part of the first class X-Men. And so it's them right now kind of like, hey, buddy, it's just you and me. But now we jump over to Gambit and also Rogue. Now, for me, this was hard to watch. And the reason why, because these two characters have gone through a lot in a very short period of time. And the reason why I'm saying that, because when it came to Gambit and Rogue, they were only on the same team together back in like 1991 and going forward. And so right now, we're in 1995, I want to say. And so in that window right there, you had these two characters go back and forth on the whole idea of should they be together or not. And right now, it's Rogue saying, I just want to spend these last few moments with you, Gambit. It's her asking him a simple question like, hey, Gambit, have you ever thought of the idea of having a family? And you have Gambit say no, but try to like stay away from her. And the thing is, he realized that he's being a complete jerk. And so it's now him wondering like, okay, you know what? What can I do to fix things before the world does end around us? Because what I said to her is completely wrong. And so now we jump over to Cable and also Domino. Now, in the Cable series, we kind of got the idea of these two characters finally dating one another. We did learn over time that for Cable, he always kind of had feelings for Domino because she was always in his corner, but he never made that move. But then he did. It was kind of like, okay, cool. Can these two characters finally confess their love for one another? But you have the two characters still not really being able to confess that love like they should at this moment right here. But when we jump over to Cyclops and Jean Grey, things are a tad bit different because for these two characters, they just got married, right? Like, they got married not too long ago, had their whole lives planned out for themselves, but now being told like, hey, unfortunately, the world is ending around you. So this is the end for you guys as well. And so for Jean Grey, she's thinking of her nephew, her niece, her parents, but also her sister, who also died by the hands of Cameron Hodge earlier in our coverage over the X-Men. But she's also thinking of Logan because, again, Jean Grey does love Cyclops, but she also loves Logan as well. And so for her, it's kind of like, man, I just wish I could say goodbye one last time to Logan. And for Cyclops, he is not even going to argue with her about that at all. But again, it's now time for them to kind of spend these last few moments with one another. But they're then confronted by Charles Xavier. And for Charles Xavier, it's really more of him kind of wondering like, hey, did I ever make a difference in the world? Like with the X-Men, with me trying to bring peace between mutants and humans, to allow them to try to live together in harmony. Did I make a small difference anywhere across the world? Now, for me personally, no, because as we saw, it only got worse and worse over time. But for Charles Xavier, he was still trying to achieve that goal. And so with all that being said, at least he was trying. And so for Cyclops and Jean Grey, they kind of tell him like, you did make a difference in our lives. And for me, that's correct, because if you think about it, some of these X-Men, they didn't have that father figure around. Charles Xavier was that father figure. For example, Cyclops, or even Bobby Drake, because as we saw in the earlier parts of our coverage of the X-Men, Bobby's father's a complete jerk. But then you have Cable walk up. Now for me, this is a great moment because now it's Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Cable being able to sit down with one another to have a conversation. And this conversation to me is really important. Let me explain why. Because, okay, there was a storyline called The Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix. And you had Cyclops and Jean Grey's souls be taken out of their bodies and pulled into the far future. And their soul to kind of place into two bodies in the far future to allow them to have the chance to raise a baby known as Nathan, young Cable, into the man we all know and love today. And so with that being said, they raised young Cable in the future, but they had different names, Slim and Red. And so for Cable, at first, he had no idea that the people who had raised him was actually Cyclops and Jean Grey. But in recent storylines, he began to figure out that, oh, Slim and Red is Cyclops and Jean Grey. In some kind of crazy way, those two people were able to raise me in the far future. That right there is pretty wild. And it's him saying right now, thank you. Because at least with that, you guys gave me a chance to have a family. And I'm like, man, the feels in this storyline. Now, you didn't have Domino walk up. And so this is the moment where we could technically say like it's Cable and also Domino being able to finally put their feelings out there and say, I like you like me, you know what? Let's go ahead and just kiss. And you're like, oh my God, this is all great. But the problem is the world is still ending around them. And so just like that, everything around them begins to freeze in time. The old timeline is going away and a brand new timeline is coming into the future. And now we are technically ready to dive into Age of Apocalypse. And so with that being said, guys, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.